The past always has a way of catching up with us, forcing a choice. Do we confront it head on, risking the possibility of breaking ourselves in the process? Or do we run from it, doomed to a life weighed down by regret, anger, and unresolved guilt? This is the crisis Barret Wallace faces in Final Fantasy VII. A man who has lost nearly everything: his home, his friends, his family. Barret's journey brings him to a haunting crossroads in the desert wasteland of Corel Prison. Here, he stands face to face with Dyne, his childhood friend and father to his adopted daughter. Dyne, once consumed by despair and vengeance, now finally finds peace through his encounter with Barret. For Barret, this encounter is more than a confrontation with his past. It's a moment of reckoning, forcing him to confront the consequences of his choices. This scene is undeniably one of Final Fantasy VII's most heartbreaking moments, pulling players into an emotional reflection on guilt, loss, and the price of survival. But just as you're processing the weight of this encounter, the tone flips entirely. Suddenly, you're thrown into a comedy slapstick fight against an oversized robot frog and a man with way too many self-esteem issues, completely nullifying the complex emotions you were just feeling. Naturally, this begs the question: is this sudden shift in tone just a misstep in pacing, or is there a deeper purpose behind this contrast? In late 2015, the creative team behind the Final Fantasy VII RE-Trilogy embarked on a monumental task: to reimagine one of gaming's most beloved classics for a modern audience. This wasn't just about upgrading the graphics or tweaking the gameplay mechanics. It was about recreating an experience that resonated as deeply today as it did in 1997. The original game had set a high bar, becoming a cultural phenomenon that left a permanent mark on the gaming landscape. Recreating that magic would prove to be no simple feat. One of the greatest challenges the developers faced was deciding what to keep, what to change, and how to balance nostalgia with innovation. From the characters' designs to the battle system, everything was carefully rethought to suit modern tastes, while still honoring the legacy of the original. Thankfully, the core themes of economic inequality, corporate monopoly, and environmentalism were still highly relevant, and are perhaps even more so today than ever before, providing the RE-Trilogy with a strong foundation to resonate with modern audiences. But perhaps the most critical challenge of all was found in the narrative choices, the heart and soul of Final Fantasy VII. Should the team deliver a literal and faithful retelling of the story with as little deviations from the original as necessary, or reimagine key moments to fit a broader, more expansive vision while simultaneously risking to stray away from the intentions of the source material? This leads us to one of the most debated aspects of the RE-Trilogy, the reinterpretation of the game's emotional high points, particularly the death scenes. These moments, which shaped the story's emotional core in the original, were approached with a mix of reverence and ambition, resulting in unavoidable differences. Because despite having Remake in its title, the narrative of FF7 Remake, and FF7 Rebirth for that matter, ended up with multiple changes from the original game. In this video, we'll take a closer look at how these decisions played out, how the iconic death scenes were adapted, the risks the developers took in altering their portrayal, and whether the changes enhance or detract from the impact that so deeply moved players over 2 decades ago. The beginning of FF7 Remake and its depiction of Avalanche is a prime example of how to elevate and reinterpret beloved side characters that had only minimal to no characterization at all in the original game. Jesse, Biggs and Wedge are the first side characters we encounter in the story, and very important ones at that, as they introduce us to the world the game is set in and help us learn more about Cloud as a character and his motivations. Both the original and the remake start off with the infamous bombing mission, sending us to destroy one of the 8 Mako reactors. We learn that Avalanche is a group of rebel fighters trying to save the planet by destroying the reactors that belong to Shinra, the evil mega corporation that controls and influences the world with their Mako technology. It's made very clear in the beginning that Cloud doesn't care about the mission, the resistance group, or the planet in general. Yet, as time goes by, we see Cloud opening up little by little to each of the team members and forming bonds with them as they become more and more lovable characters. This is something that didn't really shine through as much in the original FF7, since the time we spent with these lovable misfits falls quite short, which also leaves much about their personalities to be inferred. So after destroying the Mako reactor in a spectacular escape, we ride on the train back home to the secret base of Avalanche. It is here where we meet Tifa for the first time and learn that she is also part of the resistance group. You spend some time in Sector 7 and are free to explore the slums before you make your way to go on to the second mission to blow up the next reactor. This is where things in the story get tricky. An unexpected scan of the train blows your cover and the whole party is forced to split up. From here on out, you don't see much else from Jesse, Biggs or Wedge until the fight at the pillar takes place. The remake, however, significantly extends the time before reaching this pivotal moment, allowing us to delve deeper into these characters. This is where the remake truly shines, by fleshing out Jesse, Biggs and Wedge and providing them with richer backstories and more defined personalities. As a result, their eventual deaths at the Sector 7 pillar, along with a devastating platefall, serve as a crucial turning point for Cloud's character arc, and as he gets to know them better, a bigger emotional moment for the player too. Out of the 3 characters, Jesse is arguably the one that receives the most attention in the remake, leaves the strongest impression on you as the player. Jesse is portrayed as a very energetic and charismatic character, with a strong sense of determination and passion for Avalanche's cause. She also never shies away from a little bit of flirtatious banter with Cloud whenever the time allows it. However, it becomes clear that underneath her playful exterior lies a more complex and tragic side. Rather than heading straight into the second bombing mission, Cloud spends more time in Midgard taking on odd jobs as a merc. During that time, Jesse asks him for his help on a secret mission.
Tonight, you and me together. I want you to come with me to the Sector 7 plate. I'll give you the details on the way.
Leading them topside to her family's home. There, we learn more about her past and the true motivation driving her fight against Shinra, her father's tragic fate. He fell into a deep coma due to Mako poisoning after being overworked at Shinra, leaving Jesse haunted by guilt and convinced that his spirit is trapped between the live stream and his unresponsive body. This revelation not only opened her eyes to the evils of Shinra, but also pushed her to study planetology and ultimately join Avalanche in a desperate bid to save his spirit and prevent others from suffering the same fate. We also discover that Jessie has dreams beyond the battlefield, aspirations to become an actress at the Gold Saucer, a passion that shines through in her conversations with Cloud. This mission in particular adds significant nuance and depth to Jessie's character, showing just how deeply she cares about the team and their cause. At the same time, it highlights Cloud's gradual shift as he begins to care for his companions and relate to them on a more personal level.
Jesse's dad was in there, right?
Yeah.
Mako poisoning. Happened while Jesse was doing a show at the Gold Saucer. But what do you care?
No. I want to hear it.
What's so funny?
Just that I understand how you feel. Unlike most of the time.
I see.
Biggs's calm and composed demeanor is the direct contrast to Jesse's bright and vivid personality. He is portrayed as the mature and responsible member of the group, and generally as someone who deeply cares about the well-being of his comrades. His interactions with Cloud are of a different nature than the ones with Jesse or Wedge. While Jesse is more flirtatious and playful with Cloud during most of their conversations, Biggs always remains focused and grounded as a calm voice of reason in the group. He helps Cloud understand the dynamics of Avalanche and the stakes involved in their fight against Shinra. During the same mission, while Jesse is sneaking into the Shinra warehouse, the game emphasizes Biggs' integral role to the group. Thanks to his tactical mind and leadership qualities, the group's missions are carefully planned and executed. In a way, his thoughtful and strategic way of doing things complements Cloud's more impulsive mercenary mindset of acting on instinct and worrying about consequences later. And over time we see both of them bond and learn from another, which conversely highlights Cloud's growth as a character as he learns to trust others and think more carefully about the impact of his decisions. Although Biggs's backstory isn't explored as deeply as Jesse's in the remake, the game offers subtle hints about his past. We learn that he once worked at an orphanage, and it's implied that both he and Wedge grew up as orphans themselves, suggested by the fact that neither of them has a last name. As the story progresses, we come to appreciate Biggs for his unwavering dedication and concern for the success of every mission, as well as his genuine care for his comrades, including Cloud.
Oh, hey, Cloud. Survived the jump? How's Wedge?
He's fine.
Well, that's good to hear. Tomorrow's a really big day for all of us. When Wedge said he'd been shot, I was afraid we'd have to call off the whole damn thing. Heading topside in secret. Don't think I could have faced Barret if something had happened. But Jessie'd been acting weird, and I knew I couldn't just ignore her.
Biggs.
She must be prepping the bomb right now. But will she be able to finish before morning? I should go and see if she needs any...
Biggs.
Beneath his initially reserved and pragmatic demeanor lies a deeply compassionate and caring character.
We'll go on foot from here. Don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves.
Hey, did these things leave a mark?
They got you pretty good.
Oh, and I'm running on fumes.
Don't worry, we'll top you up soon enough. Now let's roll.
Wedge is mostly portrayed as a source of comic relief, a dedicated but not particularly competent member of Avalanche. However, the remake expands his role beyond just being the guy who makes everyone laugh, revealing deeper layers of courage and compassion within his character. While Jesse embodies the group spirit and Biggs serves as its strategic backbone, Wedge is the heart of the team. From his first moments on screen, we see his genuine kindness and how deeply he cares for his teammates, along with his unwavering commitment to Avalanche's cause. At first glance, it might seem that only the less glamorous roles, like support or reconnaissance, are assigned to Wedge to keep him busy and avoid hurting his feelings.
Listen, Wedge, I need you to hang back and guard the home front.
What? But I'm in perfect health!
Which makes you the perfect choice to look after Jesse and Marlene.
Hey.
But as with any good team, every member is equally important for the success of the mission. While Wedge often downplays his own abilities, he proves to be far braver than he gives himself credit for. However dire the situation may be, he always strives to contribute in any way he can, even if it means putting himself in harm's way for the sake of the team. Whether it's charging into battle to support his team or risking his life to save others, Wedge's courage shines through his insecurities. His willingness to put others before himself, despite his own fears, transforms him into a quietly heroic figure. And even in these heroic moments, he never fails to ease the tension with a light-hearted comment or his clumsiness, bringing much-needed levity to the chaos and action in the game's plot.
This is like a bruise or a mild burn at worst.
Now that was a gunshot.
The expanded characterization of Jesse, Biggs and Wedge is arguably one of the remake's greatest strengths, made possible by its extended playtime compared to the original. Each of them is given far more depth, making them feel like fully realized characters whose struggles resonate more strongly with the player. As a result, we're far more invested in what happens to Avalanche as a whole. The fight at the Sector 7 pillar and the subsequent platefall serve as a major turning point in the story. In the original, this section moves at a much faster pace, leaving little time to reflect on the losses of Jesse, Biggs and Wedge after their deaths. Because we don't have the opportunity to connect with them deeply, their fates generate a minimal emotional response, serving primarily to escalate the stakes and drive the plot forward. In contrast, the remake notably extends the section too, giving players time to grieve and reflect on what these characters mean both to them and Cloud. Their sacrifices are no longer just a tragic backdrop to the destruction of Sector 7, but instead carry greater emotional weight and narrative significance. Biggs' final moments underline his unwavering dedication to Avalanche's cause and show him accepting his death in a peaceful manner. Even in his last breaths, his primary concern is the well-being of Wedge and the orphans in Sector 5. He takes the opportunity to express his faith in Cloud, telling him how much he believes in him and affirming that he sees Cloud as a good person. Words that inspire Cloud to embrace the hero Biggs always knew he could be. In this sense, his death serves as a testament to the quiet strength of those who continue to fight for a better future against all odds, a sentiment that Cloud deeply resonates with. After the heartbreaking loss of their comrade, Cloud and Tifa discover Jessie clinging to her life further up the pillar. Her death in the remake is significantly more emotionally charged, unlike her brief and somewhat impersonal demise in the original game. We see a Jessie whose characteristic and upbeat energy has faded into a mix of exhaustion and acceptance. Even though she keeps up her usual dramatic act, her final moments with Cloud reflect her genuine affection for him as she expresses that Cloud is a great hero, despite his reluctance to accept this role. What makes her death especially tragic is her lament of not being able to spend more time with her friends and her unfulfilled dreams of becoming an actress, leaving Cloud and especially Tifa heartbroken. Her death serves as the ever reminder that their fight against Shinra can come at a high cost and how cruel reality can be. As far as these two characters are concerned, the remake enhances their death scenes with more impactful, emotionally charged dialogue, thanks to their expanded backstories. Though overall, the scenes remain quite similar to the original, at least for now, but we'll get to that in just a second. Wedge's fate, however, takes a notably different turn from the original. Thanks to his trusty grappling hook, Wedge survives the initial fall from the Sector 7 pillar, where he would have normally died. After being nursed back to health by Aerith, he aids in evacuating Sector 7 inhabitants. In a brave attempt to rescue his cats, Wedge is crushed, seemingly meeting his end. Yet later, when Cloud, Tifa and Barret inspect the aftermath of the plate's collapse, they discover one of Wedge's cats, leading them to his unconscious body. It appears that Wedge is the only Avalanche member that could escape the fate set for him in the original. His atypical survival at the pillar means that he can assist Cloud and the others at the raid of Shinra headquarters. And his sudden and heroic appearance through the communication screen in Aerith's old room provides everybody with a much-needed hope into the success of the mission. Wedge's generally optimistic and uplifting demeanor also acts as a positive counterforce to the loss of the other Avalanche members and emotionally alleviates some of that pain. And with the theme of defying fate slowly climaxing towards the finale, you might feel like there's a good chance that at least one of the friends from the resistance group is safe. But due to an intervention by the Whispers, Wedge is swept out of the window as the screen fades to black, leaving his fate uncertain once again.
Just tell me that I made a difference.
Much like Wedge, who seemingly defied fate, Biggs is also revealed to have miraculously survived the platefall at the end of Remake. This revelation is both shocking but also confusing, as his final moments alongside the collapse of the pillar left no room for ambiguity. This change to Biggs's otherwise definitive death compared to the original evokes a sense of hope. Perhaps Wedge, and maybe even Jesse, could have survived as well, especially with Jesse's gloves appearing on the nightstand beside Biggs. After all, Wedge already survived his initial fall, so it doesn't feel entirely impossible. The intention behind this may be to preserve the connection the player has built with these characters, keeping them around longer. By suggesting they might still be alive, the game softens the emotional blow that their original deaths delivered and that the remake otherwise would have delivered, making the goodbye at the pillar easier to bear. In the original, the deaths of Avalanche mark a fundamental shift in the story's tone, a shift that the remake captures brilliantly by building a solid emotional foundation throughout the preceding chapters. By deepening the development of Jesse, Biggs and Wedge and exploring Cloud's evolving bond with them, the remake allows us as players to connect with each member of Avalanche in a far more meaningful way than in the original. After all, one of the greatest strengths of remakes in general lies in the ability of the writers to deepen and expand upon existing characters and themes, creating a richer and more authentic experience. This trend carries through all of Final Fantasy VII Remake and continues into Rebirth as well. However, as we'll soon explore, this expanded scope can sometimes lead to unintended consequences, introducing elements that may clash with the original source material.
Hey boss, your guests are here!
Allow me to welcome you to my desert oasis, Cloud.
Welcome!
Cloud, right? Merc for hire?
Got it in one, boss man.
This is the warm welcome Cloud and the group receive upon entering the Dust Bowl, a desolate place that offers refuge to the worst criminals you'll ever encounter right beneath the luxurious gold saucer. Enter Solemn Gus, the charismatic and eccentric ruler of this underworld, always sporting a devious smile and a joke on his lips, seizing every opportunity to enrich his own pockets. Right off the bat, you may notice the unusually upbeat and groovy location theme, which feels out of place for such a setting. As Cloud makes his way out of the mansion, you can't help but contrast Gus's flattering description of this place with the reality Cloud suddenly found himself in. Contrary to the notion of a desert oasis, the scenery is marred by graffiti-covered walls and mountains of scrap and metal containers stretching as far as the eye can see. His loyal guards patrol the area in their indistinguishable bright uniforms, while heaps of trash and poor living conditions stand in stark contrast to the clean, organized environment of the Gold Saucer, where everyone lives happily amidst glitz and glam. The Dust Bowl, more commonly known as Corel Prison by the folks that live here, is anything but a welcoming place. Deception and crime lurk around every corner, and those who live here have either accommodated to the rules and become criminals themselves, or they found other ways of enduring this so-called outlaw's paradise. Corel Prison lives up to its own name, and you begin to get the sentiment that this is a hellhole most people won't escape from. Yet, despite its dark reputation, it is an undercity with its very own charm, and it invites you to explore every attraction it has to offer, like its own small coliseum, Queen's Blood matches and other minigames, different shops and bars, and several side missions with returning side characters. In a way, it is reminiscent of how the people in the slums of Sector 5 live.
So, basically another wall market.
Not exactly, but it is pretty close. Both places radiate a criminal energy in their own distinct ways, accentuated by surprisingly cheerful music. While Wall Market attempts to mask its dangerous nature with bright lights and a vibrant atmosphere, the Dust Bowl makes no effort to hide that it's a grim and perilous place. Despite Corel Prison being the last place any ordinary person would want to set foot in, the local residents have formed a society of eccentric and ruthless criminals under the rule of Solemn Gus. Yet, it's still a society with its own set of established rules, where even outsiders can carve out a niche for themselves amidst the heaps of metal and trash. While living here is obviously horrible and dangerous in itself, it seems to be somewhat bearable. At this point in the story, Barret has gone missing following a mass shooting at the Gold Saucer. While searching for him, Cloud and the rest of the group are ambushed by the residents of Corel Prison, leaving most of the party imprisoned in Gus's mansion. There's an immediate sense of urgency as Cloud is driven to free his friends, find Barret, and uncover the truth behind the massacre as quickly as possible. However, that urgency is quickly undercut once Cloud is released and you're distracted by various side activities, including quirky minigames, funky arena battles, and helping Billy gather vegetables for his chocobo as part of the main mission. The story then has Cloud compete in a chocobo race back on the Gold Saucer's upper levels to secure the prize money needed to free his friends. This sudden shift in location and the light-hearted focus on racing disrupts the atmosphere of what's supposed to be a dangerous, inescapable prison. As a result, the intended tension never quite sets in, and the prison's ominous reputation is diluted. You never truly feel in danger or immersed in a tense environment because, at its core, the game isn't designed to sustain that tone. This lighter tone is further emphasized by the abundance of humor and comic relief woven throughout the entire section, stemming from the playful rivalry between Esther, Billy and their jockey rival, as well as the banter scenes with the Turks and Palmer, and the overall wacky atmosphere of the Dust Bowl. This impression is solidified by Gus himself, who is portrayed as more of a charming and comical antagonist. His flamboyant character entrance, complete with a catchy theme song, instantly sets the tone for the story segment and signals to the player that the focus here is on fun rather than danger. The atmosphere and narrative structure lift the gritty and dirty feeling that this section could otherwise have had. This lighter feeling directly contributes to the next story beat in this chapter and is especially interesting when comparing it to the original, which I'll delve into in a little bit. So, after displaying our talent as a chocobo jockey and keeping our end of the bargain, Cloud returns to Corel Prison and Gus opens the secret entrance to the desert. He reveals the whereabouts of the wanted man with a gun arm and the group sets off in pursuit. Upon meeting Barret in the middle of a desert tornado, the game reveals his backstory along with the true culprit behind the Gold Saucer shooting.
Dyne, my best friend.
It's at this moment that the narrative tone shifts sharply to a more serious and emotionally charged atmosphere, and you begin getting seriously invested into the main story again. The original version significantly differs not only in Corel Prison's overall atmosphere, but also in the lead-up to finding Barret since his disappearance at the Gold Saucer. Even before entering Corel Prison, the tone is set with an ominous and foreboding atmosphere. The abrupt shift in music from the cheerful Gold Saucer theme to a haunting, mysterious melody as soon as you step into the Fight Coliseum immediately signals a change in mood, letting you know that something serious is unfolding. As Cloud and the party follow a trail of lifeless Shinra bodies, they become witnesses to the aftermath of a gruesome massacre. Unfortunately, they arrive at the wrong place at the wrong time and are swiftly framed as the perpetrators of this brutal crime. Captured and cast out, they're thrown through a gate that supposedly leads to heaven, at least according to the sign above. However, what lies beyond is anything but heavenly. The first impression of this desolate and oppressive wasteland, teeming with outlaws and exiles, makes it clear that this is a far cry from a paradise. Corel Prison effectively conveys a sense of forgottenness and neglect, buried beneath the glitz and vibrancy of the Gold Saucer above. It serves as a stark juxtaposition to the lively theme park we experienced just moments ago. The irony is palpable. Heaven and hell are reversed, with the opulent paradise looming overhead while the desolation and despair lie below. The muck and sadness of the scenery is further amplified by the haunting music, evoking an overwhelming urge to escape this dark, muddy hell pit as quickly as possible. A huge contrast to the way that Rebirth introduces you to this place and sets the overall tone. Unlike the freedom to enter the Dust Bowl on your own terms and actively work to rescue your friend, entering Corel Prison in the original feels like a collective punishment with no choice at all. Neither Cloud nor the player are aware of the truth behind the murder mystery. Up until this point in the original, Barret is the only man with a gun for an arm we know of, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume his potential involvement with the incident. However, given Barret's role as a key party member since the beginning of the game, there's an immediate sense of urgency to find him. When you finally come to and regain your senses, Tifa spots Barret standing near yet another body. But Barret is dead set on doing his own thing as he pushes Cloud and the others further away from him. Walking through Corel Prison fills you with constant tension and unease. Destroyed houses, piles of scrap, and a lingering feeling of death and abandonment inhabits this desert prison and the people surviving here. There is no semblance of civilization as there is in Rebirth. The only prospect that the people down here have is being lucky enough to survive the current day. There is no funky music, not much of an explorable city, and no charismatic Gus to welcome you to his desert oasis. Instead, there is Mr. Coates, serving as the messenger between outsiders and the gold saucer. Escaping from here is only possible if you win at the Chocobo race, but the difference to the way Rebirth handles it is that to do so, you need the permission of the leader of this prison, and in this case it isn't Gus or Mr. Coates, but someone else entirely. Upon finding and confronting Barret in the house of the former mayor of this town, you find out that the tyrant who rules this place with cruelty is the same person Barret has been hunting down all this time, Dyne. All the signs point towards Dyne, so after having learned of the tragedy that befell this once thriving town in the past, you make up your mind to go after him as a group. Finding him proves to be easier than expected. A trail of corpses indicates the way you need to follow. After making your way through the scrapyard, you finally encounter Dyne. The sound of gunshots rings out as the wind whips through the chasm behind him. Barret stands still, now face to face with the past he tried to leave behind. Dyne's storyline is one of the saddest and most impactful in the game. He's a man who has faced immense loss and destruction, leading him to a point where he sees no reason to live, only to inflict pain on anyone in his way. His tale highlights the consequences of one's actions, illustrating the overwhelming control Shinra has over entire communities. While much of the blame lies with Shinra, Barret himself also bears significant responsibility for the tragedy. Another reason this story resonates is that it presents a what-if scenario for Barret, showing the man he could have become if he hadn't found hope during his darkest moments. That hope comes in the form of Marlene, Dyne's daughter by blood. Ever since Corel was destroyed, Barret has taken care of Marlene, the only survivor he found beneath the rubble. This revelation shocks Dyne, but what Barret hoped would persuade him to return to Midgard together has the opposite effect. The man he once knew as Dyne the coal miner, his best friend, is long gone. Now only an empty husk remains. Angry, broken, and devoid of humanity. Dyne's twisted desire to reunite his daughter with his deceased wife is symbolized by the two crosses behind him. With this, the already eerie setting darkens further, forcing Barret to fight Dyne to protect Marlene. In the midst of battle, Barret knocks some sense into him, and for a fleeting moment, it seems Dyne has returned to his old self. With a sense of clarity, he explains how he lost something irreplaceable back then, though he doesn't know exactly what it was. His losses extend beyond his wife and child. He has lost his will to live, his reason to fight. In its place, an ever-growing hatred began to eat away on his humanity, and Dyne succumbed slowly but surely to this nihilistic worldview. The only thing that prevented Barret from succumbing to the same fate was finding a reason to fight, a purpose to create a better world for Marlene. But for Dyne, redemption is no longer possible. His hands are too stained with innocent blood. Ashamed and disgusted by the monster he has become, Dyne decides to end things on his own terms and leaves with a final bidding to never ever make Marlene cry. All this time, Dyne had thought his daughter to be dead. Discovering that she lives and might have a chance at a better future under Barret's care, combined with the sudden realization of what he has become, gives him the final push he needed. With open arms, he embraces his inner peace and falls one last time into the chasm. One last time, Barret is forced to watch his friend die before his very eyes, unable to save him yet again. The whole mood and tension that the segment of Corel Prison has been building up culminates in this brutally emotional death scene. For the first time, we see Barret crumble under immense feelings of remorse and guilt that have been brewing inside of him. The final scene conveys a profound coldness and bleakness, but within that bleakness, there is also beauty to be found. It serves as a reminder that it's worth fighting to find new meaning in life, even after losing everything dear to you. Dyne couldn't find a new purpose in life, so he leaves it all to Barret to keep fighting for the purpose he was able to find. In its core, it is ultimately a positive and hopeful message that Dyne tried to convey to Barret, giving himself and his friend the necessary closure to move on. The scene fades out as Barret and the group inform Mr. Coates of Dyne's death, presenting the memento Barret received before his passing. After a brief conversation, you follow Esther into the elevator. The game allows you a moment to naturally process your grief and wash away the tiring feelings of sadness, violence and nihilism, providing just enough breathing room before returning to the Gold Saucer, accompanied by the uplifting Chocobo theme. The encounter with Dyne in Rebirth differs in several key elements when compared directly to the original. The depressing atmosphere has been significantly toned down and transformed into a more charmingly one, as we have seen earlier in the lead-up from the Dust Bowl. Picking up where Cloud and the others almost got lost in the sandstorm, they meet up with Barret and he explains them his side to the story. To the surprise of Barret and the others, it seems he isn't the only one who ended up with a gun arm after the incident at Corel. He suspects that Dyne is the wanted culprit, as he had seen him earlier at the Gold Saucer. Yet, he also wants to believe that Dyne isn't a ruthless monster capable of such a terrible thing. Much like in the original, Barret makes the difficult decision to confront his past head-on, ready to face whatever consequences await him alone. Dyne's role in Rebirth takes a significant departure from his portrayal in the original. Instead of being the tyrannical leader feared by everyone in Corel Prison, he's presented as a broken man tied to a chair in a shack, awaiting his punishment.
Dyne, that you?
Hey, I know you.
This shift in characterization paints Dyne as more of a tragic figure, overwhelmed by his trauma and descending into a state of helpless madness. While this is a major change, it deepens the emotional weight of his story, highlighting the devastating impact of his experiences and how they have stripped him of his former self.
What?
Hell, Marlene, set a place for Barret. Yeah, he's looking fit as a fiddle. Good question. She ain't with him.
It isn't solely hate that motivates Dyne, but also his psychosis, which causes him to hallucinate the presence of his late wife Eleanor and daughter Marlene. Although that doesn't mean he is free from his hatred towards Shinra. All it takes to reinvigorate his hostility and for Dyne to immediately start attacking is to see Cloud in his soldier armor. The motivation for their fight is shifted from a sick desire to reunite Marlene with her mother to a natural feeling of betrayal and anger. Because unlike the original, Dyne only learns of Marlene's survival after the fight with Barret. This narrative alteration substantially changes Dyne's character and how the player perceives him. Dyne isn't the aimless, violent monster consumed by hate, endlessly craving revenge, to the point that he tries everything to provoke Barret into a fight. Rebirth's focus instead lies on his decaying sanity as a result of his past trauma and isolation. His hallucinations portray a man who painfully longs for his family, but is trapped in a never-ending state of suffering.
All the lives I took, just to fill the hole in my heart. Just to fill the void they left. I want to see them again, and I know what I need to do, but I can't. I just can't.
Changing Dyne's trauma response to a more general anger against Shinra also serves as a narrative reminder of who the real bad guys are and who seems to be responsible for every bad thing happening in this world.
Oh, I know. Shinra! Always Shinra!
Instead of focusing on the tragedy and aftermath that Shinra had caused on the lives of Barret and Dyne, along with the way both of them dealt with their inner hatred, as the original cared to show, Rebirth externalizes the conflict and shifts the focus directly onto Shinra, repeatedly bringing them into the picture. There's also the nuance that in the original, Barret is aware of Dyne's survival this whole time, whereas in Rebirth, Barret only discovers this now in this desert. Barret's character arc revolved around overcoming his own hatred and confronting the demons of his past, which he has willfully suppressed so that he can finally let go of the burdens that weighed him down and focus on the future. But without the knowledge of Dyne's survival, Barret isn't portrayed as the coward that runs away from his past, as he simply didn't know that he could have helped his friend sooner before things turned worse for him. But Dyne thinks differently.
Coward. When the going gets tough, he's gone.
And he's right. Barret is still a coward, but for different reasons than in the original. And with the way things unfold, it suffices to say that Dyne's death follows a different purpose and causes a different effect on Barret and the player. Dyne realizes that nothing can fill the void in his heart, especially not through the way he has been living. He understands that even killing Barret wouldn't bring him the inner peace he desperately seeks. Doing so would grant Barret an easy way out, and why would Barret deserve this, but not him? Barret shares how his life regained meaning the moment he found Marlene, expressing his hope that Dyne might find the same healing.
Look at me, Barret. You think I want Marlene to see what her father's become? Stop!
He feels angry, jealous and betrayed, hearing this shocking revelation of her survival, yet at the same time Marlene being alive is all he ever wished for. Now certain that Marlene is alive and that something good might still come from this encounter, Dyne, in his own way, ensures that Barret gets to keep living with Marlene and his own guilt. Instead of throwing himself off of a cliff, he chooses to die a hero's death, taking the remaining Shinra soldiers down with him and losing his life once more to the corporate Hydra. His dying words to Barret serve as his final request, a curse that tasks Barret with a mission to carry on after his last good deed.
You carry that guilt, that weight. Dyne. Dyne.
But these words aren't meant with ill intent. On the contrary, Dyne wants Barret to feel responsible for everything, and through that responsibility, he wants him to live and never forget for who and what he is fighting for, forcing him to keep living for Marlene's sake and never give up, always reminding himself of who he has become. It is his way of passing the torch to his best friend and leaving everything in his care. It is an incredibly emotional and gut-wrenching moment, seeing how Dyne finally finds solace and peace through his fateful encounter with Barret. Now reunited with his wife Eleanor at last, and feeling as if he has regained a shred of humanity through his sacrifice. As a player, you're left wondering about how every action in life can carry severe consequences and how important it is to keep fighting for a purpose. The incredible voice acting, paired with the music and cutscene direction, evokes a deep emotional response, demonstrating a beautiful reinterpretation of the original. However, as heartbreaking as this moment is, it unfortunately doesn't last long. The rest of Shinra's forces are already looming on the horizon, and before you know it, you're thrust immediately into another boss fight. This sudden interruption does not allow Barret, much less the player, to soak in the moment and grieve for a reasonable amount of time, as the game puts you into facing off a giant robot frog and a man with serious self-esteem issues. There's a lot of comedy and slapstick humor throughout the whole fight, and you can't help but either laugh through the tears of Dyne's death or feel incredibly annoyed about the misplaced timing of this whole section and the tonal whiplash.
Ooh, someone needs a spanking!
I've had it up to here with you!
Either way, Palmer's antics break the emotional impact that the previous segment has been trying to build up and in consequence overshadow Dyne's heroic sacrifice. Yet, the Palmer fight isn't even the end of the sequence. One event rolls into another, and right after defeating him, you're thrust into another lighthearted moment with Dio, who hands you the sand buggy. Shortly after, you're launched into an exhilarating mini-shooting sequence while battling Palmer a second time, before finally making your getaway for good. Both Rebirth and the original take different approaches to portraying the Corel prison section. At its core, Rebirth still fulfills the major story beats laid out by the original, and for the most part, it preserves the integrity of each character involved. Much like we saw with the Avalanche section, Rebirth takes the opportunity to expand locations and characters in a way that brings the world to life and deepens the lore. The transformation of Mr. Coates into Solemn Gus, for example, has proved to be a great addition to the cast of the RE-Trilogy, adding more personality and layers to the Corel prison setting. That is not to say that this reinterpretation doesn't come with side effects that may alter the overall impression intended by the original. By introducing familiar gameplay elements such as minigames, Queen's Blood matches, shops, and even chocobo riding, Corel Prison loses some of its desolate and remote atmosphere. These additions, while entertaining, dilute the oppressive and isolated feeling that was so central to the original's portrayal of the prison. Instead, the developers pivoted to a more lighthearted, pseudo-anarchic criminal society with much to see and much to do. In Rebirth, you find yourself wanting to stay longer, explore, and immerse in the activities. In contrast, the original emphasizes the urgency of getting out, narratively pushing you to spend as little time as possible in a dangerous, oppressive place where lingering for too long feels like a genuine threat. The Dyne section is also aligned with the tone of each respective version. In the original, Dyne takes his own life, capping off the dark and oppressive atmosphere that has been building up throughout the Corel prison arc. In Rebirth, Dyne dies a hero's death, only to be followed up by a humorous sequence of events, keeping in step with the lighter tone established earlier. Deciding which approach is quote-unquote better is ultimately up to the player. Still, it is safe to say that Rebirth offers a valid and tasteful take on handling weighty themes like mental illness and personal decay without being overly bleak. The narrative device of abruptly shifting from one emotional climax to another, as seen in Dyne's section, finds its most powerful expression in one of the most iconic scenes in all of Final Fantasy VII. This pivotal moment compels Cloud to confront the harsh realities of his world, further deepening his understanding of loss, responsibility, and leadership. It shapes his character development in profound ways as he grapples with grief and guilt. I am, of course, referring to the heartbreaking death of Aerith. Aerith's death in Final Fantasy VII established itself as one of the most iconic and emotionally resonant moments not only in the game but in video game history. A scene so intense, unexpected and tragic that it remains etched in the minds of a generation of players as one of the most traumatizing and memorable deaths of a beloved character. The scene takes place at a critical juncture in the game's narrative and serves as a pivotal moment for each character involved. but most importantly, it marks a defining moment in Cloud's character arc. Up until this point, the game feels like a journey, marked by a mix of camaraderie, humor, and action as you chase Sephiroth across the world. But the tone shifts dramatically when one of your most important companions, Aerith, unexpectedly leaves the party to confront the villain alone. By now, everyone in the group realizes that Aerith is no ordinary ally. She's the last surviving Cetra, the only one capable of summoning Holy, the one weapon that can counter Sephiroth's plan to destroy the planet with Meteor. The sudden shift in tone and urgency when rescuing Aerith in the capital of the Ancients creates a poignant moment that heightens the emotional stakes of the narrative in a very efficient way. Wandering through the empty streets as the group searches for Aerith evokes feelings of uneasiness and anxiety. You feel how the atmosphere is imbued with an otherworldly stillness, like a lingering sadness shrouded in an air of quiet mystery. The city feels mystical and fragile, like a dreamlike remnant of a forgotten past, barely tethered to reality. This is further accentuated by the haunting, yet beautiful, serene music. However, there is a certain dissonance that is created between what the party feels and what the environment conveys. The overwhelming urgency to find Aerith in time stands in stark contrast to the indifferent stillness in the city. This feeling of urgency is reinforced by the introspective thoughts of Cloud, which we glimpse a few times during the search. A notable shift, as we haven't seen much of Cloud's inner reflections up to this point. All this built-up tension culminates in the moment when Cloud finally finds Aerith. As he approaches her, still kneeling in prayer, the atmosphere is almost painfully peaceful. Yet, the serenity of the moment feels fragile, as if it could be shattered at any second. And it is. All the beauty and serenity are swept away in an instant. As Aerith's theme begins to play softly in the background, the white materia bounces gently from the altar and falls into the water, accentuating both the beauty of her character and the tragedy of her fate. In that moment, the player is overcome by the memories of Aerith. The way she faced every challenge with unwavering bravery and optimism, despite the immense burden she carried as the last of the Cetra. She was a symbol of hope for the world and a beacon of warmth and resilience for those around her. Though her past is marked by loss and loneliness, her spirit remained unbroken. Aerith made every moment count, always finding ways to spread light, even in the darkest times. Her courage in the face of inevitable doom, her relentless positivity, and her deep connection to the planet made her not just a tragic figure, but one profoundly lovable. Someone you wanted to protect, yet who was always stronger than she appeared. For the first time, we witness Cloud's shell crumble completely as he holds his beloved friend in his arms. It's a defining character moment that forces him to confront his own weakness and guilt, his failure to fulfill his promise to protect her. Everything he believed himself to be, the strong, stoic mercenary who doesn't need or care about others, collapses completely, and you can see Cloud becoming his real self. Yet neither Cloud nor the player is given any real time to react or process this tragedy. The game simply moves forward, forcing the reality of the situation to settle in as another manifestation of Jenova appears to fight you. The immediate transition from mourning to combat is jarring, but purposeful. It denies you a proper chance to grieve. And instead of shifting to the boss music, as it happens with every boss battle, Aerith's theme keeps playing uninterrupted, cementing the emotional impact in a masterful way and giving her death meaningful and symbolic significance. The fight itself against Jenova feels as if you're mourning and fighting at the same time. As Cloud and the party land the final blow, there is no sense of victory. Only an empty, hollow triumph over an enemy that has already inflicted its worst harm. The young flower peddler that once was, is now gone, forever. What follows then is the water burial of Aerith, one of the most tender and heartbreaking moments in Final Fantasy VII. This is the moment where both Cloud and the player can slowly come to terms with her death. The core themes of the game, sacrifice, love, and the enduring power of the human spirit that reverberate through the entire game are most present in this scene. Watching Aerith slowly disappear into the depths gives Cloud and the player a sense of closure. A powerful moment, both a farewell to Aerith and a form of atonement to Cloud. In the context of Rebirth, her death introduces new layers of mystery regarding her fate due to the nature of the game's story. Needless to say, the way Rebirth handles and builds up to Aerith's death is quite distinct in almost every way. After coming to his senses in the Forgotten Forest, Cloud and the others approach the capital of the Ancients, not knowing what awaits them. Just like in the original, there is a palpable shift in tone and urgency, but Rebirth transforms this atmosphere into something more aggressive and threatening once they arrive at the capital. The narrative change of having an early confrontation with Sephiroth and the sudden appearance of Whispers invading the ancient capital immediately heightens the stakes, and in turn creates this feeling that Cloud and the others have arrived in the middle of something far greater than themselves.
Good, Aerith. Pray. It's upon us. The reunion, when worlds merge. When spite and sorrow are harvested to feed the planet.
The result is a pacing change that ramps up the urgency significantly. With Sephiroth's threat being more present than ever, there is no opportunity to explore the city of the Ancients. It's made clear where Aerith must be hiding, but in contrast to the original, only Cloud gets to enter the inside of the sanctuary. One of the central themes of Remake and Rebirth is the tension between fate and defiance. At the core of it all lies the question of whether it's truly possible to defy fate and save Aerith this time, or if everything will ultimately play out the same, no matter how hard one tries to change it. While Cloud makes his way through the Whispers, trying to stop him, you see Aerith praying in the middle of this turmoil, praying for the safety of her friends, the planet, the people she holds dear to her heart. This is the point where everything about Aerith's death from the original diverges significantly. You succeeded. The dreaded moment of losing Aerith is gone. Yet, it is this false sense of security that Rebirth wants you to feel. You are given hope that Aerith will survive, only to have the rug suddenly pulled out from under you a few seconds later, revealing the heartbreaking reality of her death. A far more brutal display of her final moments and a shocking twist at the same time. A devastating, but also very confusing moment for you as a player. The sense of confusion deepens as you are given hints of an explanation for this, with the scene switching between two conflicting realities indicated by the static effects. In one of them, we see Cloud mourning her death and talking, very similar to how it happened in the original game, but we don't get to hear what he says exactly. In the other, we see Cloud weeping and holding Aerith in his arms, with her suddenly opening her eyes and comforting him.
Cloud, it's okay.
The ambiguity and uncertainty of reality is further reinforced by the fact that as soon as they arrive, everyone else besides Cloud reacts with anger, sadness, and disbelief. From their perspective, Aerith is already dead. This duality of perspectives is an element that is also directly translated into the gameplay of the following boss fight against Jenova. Every other party member starts the battle with their full limit breaks due to the heightened emotions. Everyone except for Cloud. He doesn't feel the same sadness or anger as the others because to him Aerith is very much alive. This dichotomy of narratives is also reflected in the music during the sequence. Unlike in the original, Aerith's theme doesn't keep playing uninterrupted during the whole fight, but transitions into Jenova's theme at a certain point. The feelings of sadness and nostalgia that are initially evoked are abruptly overshadowed by a sense of corruption and threat. This change of music is symbolic of Jenova's parasitic nature, but in context of the original, you're also denied the finality. Whereas before there used to be a space for mourning and grieving, the sudden intrusion of Jenova's theme creates a jarring dissonance that reflects the narrative's refusal to give a clear answer about her fate. It prevents you from settling into the sorrow of the moment and pushes you into a state of confusion and heightened emotion. This emotional tension peaks in the final phase against Sephiroth. Aerith reappears and fights alongside Cloud, suggesting that she might exist in some form, whether as a spirit or a projection from another timeline. Until this moment, it remained unclear whether Aerith had truly survived.
Let's end this. Together.
I must admit, I underestimated you.
Her sudden presence creates a narrative whiplash that challenges your expectations and deepens the emotional conflict even more. Even so, as a player, you're left confused about the finality of her death. Aerith's death is not set in stone, blurring the lines between life and death, hope and despair all the more. The fight against Sephiroth ends and Aerith's body lies motionless on the ground. Everybody around her is consumed by shock and pain, yet Cloud behaves different. From his perspective, it's as if only he and Aerith exist. However, what makes the whole sequence the most ambiguous and emotionally dissonant is the skipping of the water burial scene. In the original, this scene served as a poignant moment symbolizing her death, allowing you to mourn alongside the characters and providing a visual and emotional marker of her passing. In Rebirth, the scene is notably absent. Instead of showing the ritual itself, the game cuts directly to the party sitting quietly by the water's edge after the burial has supposedly occurred, with Aerith reappearing next to Cloud while the others remain unaware of her presence. This omission is significant, because it denies you as a player a sense of catharsis and emotional closure. It leaves a gap in the narrative, one that feels conspicuously incomplete and heightens the overall scenes of uncertainty. By skipping the scene, Rebirth forces you into the same state of limbo as the characters, particularly Cloud. This lack of closure is compounded by Aerith's constant and sudden reappearance, making the moment feel almost surreal. For the player, this also raises endless questions such as, is Aerith alive in some form, perhaps connected to the livestream? Or is this a projection of Cloud? Or just a manipulation by Sephiroth or Genova? But these questions remain unanswered, making it impossible for you to fully mourn Aerith in the same definitive way that the original intended. Her death is no longer a simple moment of tragedy, but something far more complex and layered. Yet, regardless of the true nature behind Aerith's reappearance, the result of these narrative and thematic choices is a form of suspended grief, a state of mourning that never fully reaches its conclusion. As we approach the final installment of the RE-Trilogy, there is hope that we may yet witness Aerith's water burial scene, perhaps through a flashback, offering the catharsis needed to finally let go of the suspended grief and pain surrounding her death. Alternatively, the developers may craft an entirely new scene that provides a similarly powerful opportunity to mourn her loss. After all, one of the greatest strengths of the RE-Trilogy lies in the ability of the writers to deepen and expand upon existing characters and themes, creating a richer and more authentic experience, as we've explored throughout this video. Furthermore, the comparison of the various key moments throughout Remake and Rebirth showed that these changes can affect the emotional impact of entire scenes. Take for example the whole Corel prison section, which has been lightened in tone to thematically align with the narrative shift from Dyne's psychopathic lust for revenge to a more tragic form of madness. While this change softens the emotional blow that the original had, especially with the Palmer invasion, it's a deliberate choice, as the developers felt like some changes were necessary to accommodate for current social norms. Suicide is an incredibly dark and sensitive topic, and to sensibly portray someone driven to that point is very difficult and potentially problematic. By balancing this moment with a more charming and light-hearted tone before and after, rather than the original's bleak dystopian atmosphere, the developers have found a perfectly acceptable way to handle this complex issue from a narrative standpoint. The overarching goal of the RE-Trilogy is to create an experience that feels both new and nostalgic for fans of the original Final Fantasy VII, while also capturing the essence of the game for a new generation of players. This especially applies to how veteran players anticipate the familiar story beats they know and love. To achieve this, the developers introduce the Whispers, a narrative device representing a predetermined fate set by the original game. As we saw with the Avalanche section, characters like Jessie, Biggs and Wedge live longer than expected, deviating from the original storyline and providing a uniquely new experience even to veteran players. This makes sense given the remake's investment in fleshing out these characters. Keeping them around longer or reintroducing them in different contexts enhances the world building of the RE-Trilogy and helps develop other key figures. But it also diminishes some of the emotional weight that a definitive death at the Sector 7 pillar would have carried. Ultimately, none of these characters overstayed their welcome, as they meet their ends one way or another, staying true to the original story. And even though they might end up the same, they each manage to at least temporarily defy their predetermined fate. This could leave you, as the player, with two distinct impressions. Either that no matter how hard you try, destiny will always find a way, or that fate, even in its inevitability, is not infallible. And as we all know, if fate can be wounded, it can be defeated. This point is powerfully illustrated in the most important scene of all, Aerith's death. Instead of a one-to-one recreation, the creative team opted for a more complex and layered narrative, raising questions about memory, fate, and the character's future. And although confusion may be the dominant emotion in that moment, and not overwhelming sorrow like in the original, each time I rewatch and reflect on that scene, I gain more and more appreciation for it. Because before the remake project was even a thing, Aerith's death was a major point of fan discussion and theorizing. What if she never died at the capital of the Ancients? Could Sephiroth find another way of summoning Meteor? Could the planet still be saved from Shinra? And being able to ask these questions and explore these what-ifs is perhaps the greatest gift a Final Fantasy VII fan could receive.